I put the link to the website in the chat. And so you are free to use any tool that you want. They're meant to be shared and to be reused. And so let's get started. So the seed library was created in October 2020, and I'm going to start by telling you about our origin story. So I had been looking for volunteering opportunity for several years, but I couldn't really find anything that matched my value system and the impact I wanted to have on the world. One night, tuned in into a presentation by Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer, who is an ethnobotanist and also indigenous. Her talk was on what does the earth ask of us? Someone asked her a question, which is the following. The world is on fire. What can we do to help? Where do we get started? And she said something very useful to me at that moment, which is use your talents and do what you're passionate about. So that night, I made a list of the things I knew I could contribute, my experience, my knowledge. And I was thinking, what's the one thing I could do every day without getting tired of it? And the only thing I could come up with was gardening. I was thinking about my values, what kind of mark I wanted to leave in this world. And as Colleen mentioned, I wanted to address Indigenous reconciliation, climate change, and female empowerment. That same May, I had planted my first native plant, the spotted jopai weed you see in this picture. And I was hooked. I had been a gardener, but I had never seen so much ecological impact from one plant in all the years I've been gardening. So I asked myself, what prevents people from gardening with native plants? In Ottawa, there were two main problems. We didn't have access to local native seeds, and people didn't have a lot of knowledge on what are native plants and why they're important. So as a result, in that October, I decided to start a Facebook group to share science-based information. And because it was COVID, I started mailing seeds. I was lucky enough at that time to find a few crazy people that believed in my idea and donated me seeds. And I think I mailed seeds to 200 people that year. And, it was me in my basement and some people that supported me. And that was kind of how I got going. And so I also want to share with you my teacher. So in 2020, I met Matthew Oliver, and now he works as a commission member for the Alberta Utilities Commission. Matthew is a Mitzi from Red River, and he walks both world Indigenous and non-Indigenous worldviews. Whenever I have a question where to steer the organization, I ask myself ethical questions. He always makes himself available and generously share the teachings he received from his community. You'll see throughout this presentation that his teachings and Indigenous teachings are interwoven in the fabric of the seed library. And so if at some point you hear some new concepts and you're like, wow, this is mind-blowing, well, chances are it's coming from Matthew and not from me. So Matthew is on the line also today, so I wanted to give him a little shout out. I wanted to invite him so that you can see what I've done with the teachings and how we are transforming them in a world around us. So I want also to acknowledge my commitment to Indigenous reconciliation by highlighting the seventh generation principle. I had a little bit of trouble to find a tree that showed, 7 generations of the same family. So anyways, I tried to do the best with what I had. But, to me, this effort that, I'm going to talk to you about today is about using the privilege that were given to me by my ancestors, because they exploited the land without necessarily being reciprocal with nature and being responsible with it. And I'm doing my part to try to leave a better place for the next 3 generations that are coming after me. To me, lawn is a symbol of dominance of Mother Nature, of the way we control nature and how we perceive chaos. And I take at heart the decolonization of our urban areas by reintroducing the plants that belong to the land we occupy. So in this section, I'm going to talk about what are native plants, why they're important, what are stray species, and how we ensure that we only collect straight native species as part of our collection. So what are native plants? Native plants are the plants that grew in this region before European settlement. You're gonna see, like throughout the presentation, we put a few pictures of plants. These are all native to our region. So from a human perspective, why should we grow native plants? It's all about choosing the right plants for the right conditions. If you do that, you're not going to have to use fertilizers, pesticides, or watering after they're established. So from a human perspective, it makes a lot of sense to focus on plants that are used to grow without human intervention. When we look at it from an ecosystem perspective, plants and our wildlife have been co-evolving together for thousands of years. So what does that mean? That means that the beak of the hummingbird matches, the length of the bloom of the plant that it pollinates. So then, it gets food and then the plant gets pollinated. It means that, maples will start blooming at the same time as our bumblebees will emerge. And so the trees, they get pollinated and the bees get food. So that's what we mean by co-evolving together for thousands of years. And unfortunately, in the last few hundred years, we've imported and introduced human modified plants. And that's been done to a rate that's faster than they can biologically evolve. What happens also is that caterpillars depend on specific chemicals in plants to survive. And so that means that if those specific chemical compounds are not found in that plant, these caterpillars cannot survive. And so there's a lot of buzz, pun intended, around pollinators because, like we care and we want to make an impact. But if we really want to maximize our impact, we have to grow plants that support their full life cycle, not just when they're in their adult form, which is when we call them pollinators. And so to grow native plants is to support their full life cycle. And so I'm going to give a few numbers to illustrate this point. So all of the numbers come from the National Wildlife Federation. So 90% plus of all moths and butterfly caterpillars only eat particular native plants or group of plants. So that means that they're dependent on those chemicals, as I said, to be able to survive as a species. 96% of birds feed insects to their young. People will think, oh, I put a bird feeder, I'm feeding the babies. No, unfortunately, their digestive tubes are really soft and seeds are really hard. And they need like soft insects that are easily digestible to be able to eat. And so they depend on insects to be able to feed their chicks. To have enough caterpillars for one chickadee brood, we need to have 70% of our garden to be native plants. And so that's a lot of caterpillars that we're talking about just to feed a brood of chickadees. They have 2 or 3 babies per brood, and we're looking at 2 to 3 caterpillars per baby. And so we need to really generate a lot of insects just to feed a little brood of chickadees. And so when we think about the impact of that at an ecosystem scale, this is really important. So how do we determine what's native or not? The Ottawa Wildflower Seed Library uses VASCANE. So it's a database that will let us know whether a plant is native or not to Ontario, Quebec, or any of the Canadian province. We use this one because it's peer-reviewed and several organizations contribute to it. And so sometimes you will find that there's, different perspectives on whether a plant is native or not. This is the database we use because it's the best tool we found so far. VASCANE is very simple to use. You go on their website, you click on name search, you add the Latin name or English or French name, and then it will let you know, if it's green, it means it's native to that province. If it's orange, it means it's introduced. And so introduced means it was not here before colonization. So that's a plant that is not native to the province or territory. Very simple. We also only accept what we call straight species. So cultivars are plants that have been selected and cloned to present specific characteristics. So, these are kind of the typical plants you will find at large stores. They will present brighter colors. They will bloom for longer. They will have less foliage and more bloom. So all of these are different characteristics of plants that differ from the straight species. In this case, if you look at your right of the screen here, this is Flux subulata, which is native to Ontario. And as you can see, it's kind of a lilac color. This is the cultivar, which is called Scarlet Flame. The name in quotation mark after the Latin name, Scarlet Flame, is how you know if it's a cultivar. So in this case, the company modified these plants to, present like very bright colors and to have longer blooming period, which is very different than the one we have here. So there's not that much studies on the impact of cultivated varieties on the ecosystem because it depends on the modifications that have been made to the plants. And also, if you intend to share seeds locally, there's also a legal risk associated with sharing cultivars because these plants have been trademarked. And so you're actually sharing what belongs to a company. And so there's an ecological reason to stick to cultivars, and there's also like a legal reason. How do we ensure that we only share straight species? We have a genetic diversity policy that you're welcome to use. We also use a donation form for plant and seed donation, where people will fill, common name plant, the Latin name. So usually it's at this stage that we'll see whether or not people can give the plant or not, because that's a given. That's when we will see if it's straight species or cultivars typically. And then, where the plant was purchased or received. When people don't know where the plants come from, typically we don't accept it. What's interesting about the system that we set up is we give away free seeds and free plants. And because there's no vested interest for people to donate seeds, like they're not going to receive a perk if they're not going to receive their perk if they give seeds that are not native, they don't really have an incentive to cheat. So it's really eased the burden on our volunteers to review those donation forms, because the people that want to donate, they're really doing it out of the goodness of their heart, and they really have this at heart. And so the fact that it's free plants and free seeds really have made our jobs a lot easier when assessing this form. You also have to keep in mind that any personal information you collect, like a donor name and addresses, needs to be destroyed unless you have a legal requirement to keep it for like financial records, for example. So a good tip if you want to share this locally. So in this section, I'll talk about the Seed Library's vision, our values, and our impact so far. Our vision is to inspire communities to build interconnected, ecologically robust native plant habitats, one plant, one person at a time. So that one plant and one person at a time is really how we focus on it. Everything you do is better than if you hadn't, even if it's just one plant. And I'm really happy that so many of you decided to join us today, because you are part of our vision to inspire communities and for us to be more interconnected and create those ecologically robust native plant habitats. This is a teaching that I received from Matthew. So for indigenous peoples, plants, animals are also people. And, we typically think of ecosystems as, a web of relations where everything is always rebalancing itself when there's disturbances and so forth. And we know that, for ecosystems, the more interconnected habitat is, the stronger and more resilient the ecosystem is. And we have a scientific pillar in our organization, but we also have a strong community focus. And the same goes for peoples. The more we are interconnected, the stronger we build our relationships among us, the more resilient and stronger we are as a community, and the more ecological impact we can have. And so my hope is also that by attending this presentation today and feeling, that you want to take this on to, you can also be part of our interconnected web of relations. Oh, sorry. So next I'm going to talk about our 3 values, and our 3 values are really the pillars of the organization: ethical, reciprocal, and empowered. So on the ethical side, we have an ethical harvesting policy that you can use. We also have guidelines on ethical harvesting that we really take at heart. We tell people to ask permission from the owner before harvesting, never to take plants from the wild, because this is how invasive species get into new ecosystems. It's also, poaching and, some of the disappearance of some native plants. So we don't encourage people to take plants from the wild. And we also ask people not to take seeds from the first nor last plant they see in the wild. They need to collect from a large population. And we also don't encourage nurseries that don't disclose where their seeds or plants come from. And so if, somebody's selling wild ginger and they haven't disclosed where those plants are coming from, then as an organization, we are not going to promote them. The next value is reciprocal. As I mentioned before, we have no membership cost. Everything we do is free. So the concept of the library is that people check out seeds and plants, and when the flowers have bloomed or they have plants to donate, they check them back in and return plants and seeds. So there was some pressure at some point to maybe try to really hone in that people have to bring back seeds to the seed library. And Matt shared with me a teaching that I want to share with you today. So what he said that was really crucial. He said, who are we to rank what contribution is more important? If you let the web of relations work, people are going to give you what you need when you need it. And so I thought that this was really a valuable teaching, because this is exactly what's been happening since we started this organization in 2020. We don't dictate that people have to bring back seeds or plants. And as a result, like, people have been making envelopes, driving seeds from one event to the next, making us baked goods. Everybody's contributing to their own way. And people feel a lot more included because of it. And we never have had any problems getting any financial or substantive donations. And finally, our third value is empowered. So that goes hand in hand with teaching responsibilities. At their heart, libraries are all about the democratization of knowledge. And we do the same here. I talked about a scientific pillar. We share scientific information in an accessible format, and we always use references. We teach people about removing invasive plants and the impact of their gardening decisions on the ecosystem. And when we deal with people, when we talk with people, we always assume when people know better, they do better. And so whenever we communicate with people, we try to look at it from the perspective they're doing with the best with what they have, and that it's our job to give them more information so that they can make better decisions. So how has that translated? So these are numbers just from fall last year and mailing in January 2024. So in the fall, we had 7 in-person events, and we gave seeds to 800 individuals, community projects, and schools. And we also mailed seeds to individuals, community projects, and schools. And I know a lot of you received some that might be on the line. And we are happy to do it again this year. You can also put in your request for free seeds, and I'm going to give you the date later in the presentation. We also not only give a lot of seeds, but we also provided a huge diversity of seeds. So we give away more than 200 different species. So that's a big contribution to the diversity in our local ecosystem. So in this section, I'm gonna give you practical ways of starting your own local initiative. As I mentioned before, this presentation is recorded, and I put the link in the chat to the website so you can see all the documents I'm gonna mention. Don't feel like you have to take notes frantically. you will have all of the information and you can ask me questions via email later, as you ponder on it for the next few weeks. So the first question, how to set up your own organization? That's a question I get asked often. I want to stress that you do not need for any formality or formal organization unless you have monetary needs that require you to raise a lot of money or access large grants. If you are just doing seeds, sharing seeds locally, you don't need a board, you don't need to become incorporated, you don't need to become a registered charity. You can just decide to do that on your own without necessarily some formality. It just gets triggered whenever you start managing more money. My recommendation is also to focus on tasks, not structure. In Ottawa, I don't know if it's the same elsewhere in Canada, but we have so many committee meetings that we support. We vowed that we would not get stuck in that kind of stuff on our volunteering time. So what we do is we focus on tasks. You're gonna see at the bottom here, it's called an action item log. People have specific tasks that have a beginning and an end. They perform the task and then they're done. There's no need to sit on committees and so forth. We just have a board because we manage a budget of a few $1,000s and we need transparency and processes for that. But other than that, there's no formal structure. And people really like that model. We use a simple tracker of tasks. So I pointed out to the action item log here at the bottom. So it's basically like what needs to be done, by whom, what date was it added on the log, is there a deadline, and who's doing what here. So we just keep track of things like that. Everybody that has things to do has that link, and so we share visibility like that. Another good tip that I found was a lifesaver is that Google Docs is your friend. Like back in the day, people used to work on Microsoft Word documents, PDF it, put it on the website, PDF it, share. With Google Docs, it's really nice because you can edit in real time, and it's always the last version that's available. And you'll find that that's something we use a lot in the way we operate. I'm gonna give you some more details on the different activities to do during the different times of year. This diagram was made by Samuel Legrelier in Moncton, who started the Greater Moncton Wildflower Seed Library. And it's really an important diagram because typically when we talk about, regular or mainstream gardening, people start sowing their seeds, January if you have peppers or something like that, and then up to May when you can sow directly outdoors. For native plants, it's a little different because they're made to sustain our harsh winter conditions. They have built this protective shell around them that can only be broken through freeze and thaw cycle. And so by going like this, at some point it gets softer and then poof, it can germinate. And so most of them need to go through some form of freeze and thaw or springtime or coldness to be able to germinate. And so as a result, most of the seeds we have here are sown between December and February-ish in Ottawa. So right now, we're going to start with what to do now. We are collecting and packing seeds. The way we're set up too, what's interesting is that we have started collecting seeds. I started filling my basement, and our first events will be in late October, beginning of November-ish. And so that really means that our seeds are as fresh as they get, because we really minimize the time between collection and the time that people can get them and winter sow them in December or January. And that really maximizes the germinated rate we can give to our clients and their ability to be successful. We also worked on, I'm pretty proud of this work, we worked on the how to harvest and pack native seed spreadsheet. So I'm not gonna go over it. You're gonna see the link on the website. It's fairly extensive. It has maybe 280 kind of different species. It tells you how to harvest them, if there's cultivars of that species. There's a link to the label. I'm gonna talk about the labels later. There's videos on how to harvest the seeds. There's images of what the seeds look like. And there it also tells you how to store the seeds, whether it's in the fridge or air dry. And so I really encourage you to familiarize yourself with the spreadsheet, because it's really is a really useful tool to get to learn fast all about the native species. We also have developed like seed envelope labels. And so again, you have access to that too. So it's basically a list of all the species we've offered in the past. You click on this link, and then a Word document appears. And this is like rows of labels. Our volunteers or donors can only just have to print this sheet, cut the labels, and then just tape them on their seeds that they're giving us. And so that makes everybody's life easier. And it also ensures that we have kind of a common look and professional feel to what we do. So again, this is available to you. You can use whatever you want. You don't need to quote us. You don't need to ask permission. Just go ahead and do it. So people start packing individually, this is kind of the time to get going, like, milkweed and others are kind of starting to be ready. How to store seeds. So this is a picture of my basement last year. So this, don't worry if you're starting off, it's not gonna go crazy like that from the get-go. But it's really exciting because every seed we have is, think about it in terms of the ecological impact this has on the ecosystem. And so in our case, like we use paper envelopes unless it's specified, and you'll find that information in the spreadsheet I mentioned to you. You want a space that's dry, cool, and something that's gonna prevent molding. So you really want to make sure it's dry. In my case, like I use a dehumidifier, and I got that one on Buy Nothing. So like I got it for free on Facebook. And I also use the air purifier that I got during COVID times. And so that's kind of some of the tools I'm using in my basement to keep everything dry, because you don't want to, disease or mold to get through your collection. And I've been using that for 5 years. This is the 5th year, and so far so good. If you are keeping your seeds in the longer term, so, beyond the winter sowing season, they will need to be fully dried before freezing them in an airtight container in the freezer. And airtight is important so that you don't allow moisture in, so then they don't become moldy. And then, this I showed you a little bit the basement, how it looks like. And I'm gonna walk you through how we organize all the different boxes that you saw in the picture. And so we call that our green boxes, and the covers are also available to you. We put one species per box. And so this is, red columbine, and this was another species. The top includes the English, the French, and the Latin name, a picture, the height and width of the species, when the plants are in bloom, and then a link to additional information. You cannot really see it right now, but we also have a little star on it, so that people, if they've never gardened, they can just look at the box and then see a gold star and know, okay, this is easy to contain and easy to grow. So for somebody that's never gardened before, that's the way to go. These are really easy to start with. And then these seeds are also stored in stackable plastic bins. Well, we provided the link also on the website. They're actually like boxes you use in construction to store like screws and things like that. And they're stackable. And we use the lid because during COVID times, we had to hold events outside, and maybe you're going to be holding events outside. And we found that this was a great way to make sure that, the seeds would not get watered or snowed in, and that we would keep everything dry. And so that's, we've had those same boxes for 5 years and they're still holding up. So we're pretty happy with our idea here. And the dimensions we tell people to make the envelopes in match the green box. So the way we've organized all those boxes is by condition. So we found that you know, because if you think about the fact that we had like over 200 species, you kind of have to make it not overwhelming for people when they come to our events. And so the way we found that was the most um, accessible way to organize the seed collection is to ask people before they come or when they come, what are the conditions you're dealing with? Is it dry? Is it moist? You know, is it shady? And so what we've done is we've grouped the species with the conditions that they prefer. Okay. So in this case, we have, these are the different groups of conditions we have. We have sun to part shade dry, sun to part shade medium, and so forth. And so what happens is if you go to, like if you can see here, there's different tables. Each table is filled with species that prefer those conditions. And so this, for example, if it's the full sun table, then all of the species that are at the table love full sun conditions. And so somebody that comes in to our event and says, I'm dealing with full sun, it's sandy, scorching hot, what can I do? No problem, go to the full sun table. And so at that table, we have volunteers that can help people choose the right species for their spot. And then once the green boxes are filled, what we do is we have, you know, bins underneath the table, and they are Ziploc bags with the extra seeds in. And so at the event, the volunteer that's the table is responsible for filling the green boxes as people pick up seeds. And the best system we found so far is to take the top of the green cover, print it, and then put it like within the Ziploc bag. And so it's easy to find during the events. So you can choose to pack seeds individually, you know, at home. That's kind of how you get going. You know, you're one, you have a few buddies, you do it individually. You can also choose to pack seeds collectively. And so what we've been doing also is having events where we invite anybody who is interested to come and pack seeds with us. We find places that are inexpensive, so usually community spaces. In that instance, we use like a greenhouse. So you want to pick something that you can be a little bit messy because there's going to be seeds everywhere. And if you don't have money or anything, you can tell people just bring your seeds, your tape, labels, and containers. And we found that these events are a great way to teach people how to pack and clean seeds. And so it's a good investment of your time to be able to supervise people and tell them how to do it. And then after that, they can work independently. So how to distribute seeds. So I mentioned that we had 7 events last fall. And so again, find spaces that are inexpensive. The first year I started was during COVID time, so it had to be outside and everything was closed. And so basically what I did is I went on Facebook. I said, I want to hold events across the city to distribute seeds. Are any of you on this Facebook group, you know, page, people that I've never talked to in my life, can I come into your driveway and just get people to come and pick up seeds there? And surprisingly, I found one spot for each of the location I picked. So people are really nice. People are really friendly in Ottawa. And they allowed me to just go a random stranger go in their driveway to give away seeds. So this is the first event we ever had. This is my home. And people just came and just walked around and picked up seeds. I also highly recommend it. That's something that somebody else had a great idea, but you know, have also a place at your event that teaches people how to winter sow. And so that really helps like alleviate the risk that people are not successful in winter sowing if they can go and talk to somebody in person and ask them questions. So that's really useful. I'm not going to cover how to winter sow because my understanding is that somebody else is going to cover this. I just want to share with you some of the lessons learned we had over the last few years of trying to teach winter sowing onto a large scale. Don't put your seeds to a south-facing spot. Northeast is the best spot. Keep them moistened, not wet. And if you have to choose between too much sun or too much shade, go with more shade than baking, because baking, if you think about them, when they're in nature, they kind of go, they dry, they fall on the ground or fly away and fall on the ground, and then usually like leaves or something or debris will fall on it, and so there's not going to be that much direct sun. And so if you put it in a container plus you put it in direct sun, they're just going to bake. And so 95% of the people that are not successful at winter sowing is because they put it in a south facing spot. So that's a message that I really want to harness with you as you embark on this journey. So once you winter sowed, in December, January, February, then time to make paper envelopes. And so we reuse any types of paper, and people are really nice about it. So it's a time of the year where everybody's feeling a little depressed, and we kind of don't know what to do with ourselves because it's kind of a slow time for gardening. And so we make paper envelopes using any recycled paper. We invite people to do it on social media. And we also hold envelope making events. And that is a way for us to sustain momentum and engagement throughout the year, even though there's not a lot going on in terms of gardening. In Ontario, also, we have teenagers looking for volunteer hours. And so they're also a good resource to tap in. So after people have done their winter sowing, like they might have extra plants or extra seedlings they're not using, and they may have native plants at home that they can share. And so we also use like a donation form, a seed and plant exchange form. So it's an individual form that people, again, you Google Docs, people put on it, I'm offering this plant in Orleans, or somebody says, I'm looking for this plant and I live in Alta Vista. And so we just have this exchange, informal exchange on our Facebook group, and people sign in whatever they want to give or what they're looking for. And it's kind of a self-contained activity where we just have to do some monitoring to make sure people donate native spray species. But if you're just starting off, this is a really good way of getting going without a lot of effort. And then we also organize events where we share plants. So this is a bit bigger than just the individual event form that I mentioned. So what we do is people bring whatever they have. So it can be plants, it can be like little baby seedlings that they got because they had extras of the winter sowing. And so people come to our event, they line their plants up, and then we have some volunteers that assess their plants to make sure they meet our criteria for native straight species. And then people are free to just take whatever they can use and donate, anything that they have. We don't prescribe also what kind of format people will have to use to give plants. As I mentioned, people just take their winter sowing here. We put, spoons and forks in them, and people just scoop out what they need. Some people the thing we encourage the most is to give plants in just a bucket of water or plastic bags. Putting them in water reduces costs associated with transplanting. It reduces, the work for the donor, which we don't want. And it also reduces our likelihood of spreading invasive earthworms because you're kind of giving it the root wash before time. So we found that the putting plants in buckets of water, and it also reduces transplantation shock for beginners. And so most people don't know, when they're starting, they have good intentions. They don't know they're supposed to properly water their plants. And so that's also another way of making sure that they're as successful as possible in their gardens. How to raise awareness. We have really nice volunteers that go to lots of events across the city and to make presentations or just have a table at events. Sometimes when we work with environmental organizations, we want to recycle as much as possible and reuse and things like that. But we have to balance it with the fact that we need a polished brain too to be taken seriously. And so it's kind of a fine line to know, okay, we are going to so in our case, we reuse paper to make envelopes and as much as possible. But our advice is also to make sure you have a polished brain, so then your municipal councilors, all of the people, the traditional media, they take you seriously in your actions. You can also attend community events, schools, farmers markets. Often they have like free booths for you. And you can also contact your counselors and also promote everything on traditional media. So how to use social media. So the way I think we've been kind of successful with our social media presence. So I want to give you some tips on that. We focus on science and we don't ask for people's opinions in general. We try to use references as much as possible, encourage people to do that. We don't go on our social media and say, what do you think about New England Aster? Like we try to focus more on what wildlife does New England Aster supports. We always assume good intentions and participation in good faith. Your job as a moderator is to keep an eye on group dynamics and not to cater to individuals' needs. And of course, not tolerate violent or unsafe comments. And, sometimes like on Facebook, for example, social media, there's a lot of venting going on. What we try to focus people on is practical solutions to problems and not just venting. And so that's another teaching from Matt that I learned is, if you take a look at poison ivy in the wild, like it gives us skin rashes, and we can also use jewelweed as the medicine. And so they grow together and we have access to the medicine. And so think about your social media presence as, venting the toxic world we live in. This is an ailment. And what you're trying to do with your social media presence and your community is to bring some medicine. Yes, we know the word is difficult. We recognize that, but we are trying to focus on solutions. The way that I see my role as a leader and how you can see yourself as somebody who's managing an initiative in your community is you have a lot of people out there. They have a lot of knowledge and skills. They have a lot of anxiety and energy going on everywhere. That is kind of going, in different places. And as a leader, you're kind of the power transformer. So I'm using a little bit of an engineering analogy here, whereas the power transformer takes like a bunch of energy and then makes it more focused. And so then it can have a bigger impact and divides it in smaller chunks. And basically, as a leader, that's what you're doing. You're taking people that are unorganized and you're saying, okay, thank you, you know this and that, focus on this, and this is how it's going to help. And don't wait for people to give you permission to be a leader. And if you don't look up and see yourself reflected in the leaders you have around you, just be the leader you want to be and you feel like the world needs. How to manage volunteers. So the most important thing I think is to give the right task to the right people. And so when people approach me to volunteer, I sit down with them and I have an hour conversation so that I know what they're good at, what they're passionate at, and I can give them tasks that they will be successful at. You don't need to know everything as a leader. You just need to make sure you build a team that knows enough about what you're trying to do. Trust the web of relations. As a leader, it's kind of scary sometimes to think about all the work that needs to be done, but ask people, and the people that are in your community and in relationships with this community will step in and help. This is probably what's happening with, in your area of the world today, because you were like, oh, I want to make a difference. I don't know how. So you are joining this web of relations, and I'm showing you all the teachings I received from, Matt, from Dr. Robin Walkimmer, but also things that, we've learned through experience. So we are in this together and we can make it happen. Tell them how the volunteers, what they're doing and how it supports the big picture. And, you're co-creating this together, so you will make mistakes, but that's okay. We're learning from them. And at the end of each season, try to set up some time to celebrate and thank them for their work. How to manage yourself as a leader. So this is like more like personally as yourself, like how do you manage yourself taking care of such a big undertaking, be patient with yourself, it takes some time to understand, the people that volunteer with you, how to work together, and also trying to learn about our ecosystem and native plants, all together, and heal the land. What kind of action can I do to have the biggest impact? And so if you were like, if you take for granted, like if we think about people or like plants as people's, like, if you were dating somebody, you would not expect to know them the first date, You're building long-term relationships here. So give yourself a break. You're working on it. And if you work a little bit every day, you're gonna get there. This, I put the little picture of the rabbit and the turtle because, as you know, the rabbit ran and then lost the race, the little turtle. So your job is to be the little turtle. Do a little bit at a time, but you're in this for the long run. It's a marathon. It's not a race. Set some boundaries, a space in your home for some cleaning and packing seeds and also storing. That will help with your mental, well-being. Trying to separate your volunteering and, your work. What you also want to do is not keep seeds in the long term. We always start with fresh seeds from year to year. Not only is it better for germination rate, but it also allows me to keep my mental sanity. Because you need a break. And so also make sure that you do not carry tasks of one season into the next. And so as I mentioned, you are making paper envelopes in the spring. Don't do it when you're planning your events in the summer. Don't do it when you're trying to pack seeds in the fall. Like, try to set some blocks of times. And so don't carry forward all of the work, because then you're gonna, it's better to divide it in smaller chunks. And as I mentioned, it's a marathon, it's not a race. So finally, like in terms of next steps, as the image says, big journeys begin with small steps. Be the little turtle, not the rabbit, and do what you can with what you have. So basically, this presentation, we dumped on you all of the information we've been building on, the lessons learned we've learned for the last 5 years. We don't expect you to have a big organizations like we have in Ottawa. Like, there's 1 million people living in Ottawa. It's a big city, so that's kind of why we have to have a big organization. But, like if you're in a small municipality or even your small neighborhood, like everything you do is better than if you hadn't done anything. And so collect your seeds locally and start small. And, whatever you're doing is better than not doing anything. You can reuse any documents that we have on our website. You can contact me, via Gmail if you have any questions. And we will be mailing seeds in priority for community, schools, and Indigenous individuals starting December 27th. So as most of you know, our mailing seeds is free. All you need to know is put in your order and our volunteers will put it together for you. And that includes if you are starting your seed initiative locally, we will happily send you a big chunk of seeds to get started. And so we're happy to do whatever we can here in Ottawa to support you as a leader and, as your community. So I encourage you to join our community. This is the email address. This is our website. And again, all the templates are there for you to use. We also have an Instagram, a Facebook page, and then also a YouTube channel where you can learn all sorts of tips from us. So that's it for me.
Oh my God, Melanie, you have blown my mind.
I said from the beginning, it's probably from Matthew's teaching.
It was amazing.
Okay,
The content, the organization, your generosity. Every question I had has already been answered. I see.
Oh, that's good. I had some good help too from a lot of people around me to prep me for this. So
you obviously you have like this incredible talent of, the way you share your information is fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Lots of work, yeah.
There are
not that much talent.
There are a few questions.
Of course, yeah. Go ahead.
One I think you've already answered, but just one more time. How can we access the catalog to print seed labels and instructions? Thanks. That's from Debbie.
So we have the labels as a standalone document, but also if you go in the how to harvest seed document I mentioned to you, the big spreadsheet, if you go by species, it will tell you how to harvest, the videos, how it looks like, the labels, how to store them and everything, including the label. And so there's 2 ways you can access it.
So it's all on your website?
Yes.
Yes.
And the link is in the chat.
Thank you. And someone's asked about the chat. The chat will also be shared with you. So don't feel like you have to madly write down all of those, all the information and the links in the chat. When I'm going to save the recording. I'm also going to save the chat. And so you can access both of those when you get the links from me. Let's see another question here. How do I find out if red bee balm I received is true native? I guess this person's wondering if she has
cultivar or stick.
cultivar or a true native.
So in that instance, like for that species, because there are cultivars of scarlet bee balm, you would have to look into where you got the seeds of the plants. If they come from, a native plant nursery, like Ontario Native Plants, or, we have a cultivated art here in Ottawa, or Connaught Nursery here in Ottawa, like they are good to be shared. But if you receive the plant from a neighbor, or like some random garden event, or Canadian Tire, then they likely are not straight species. So you can still keep them in your garden because they're not invasives. It's just not the best. It just doesn't have the maximum ecological impact, So we don't want to demonize cultivars. We just don't accept them because we want to preserve the genetic integrity of our collection.
Sure. Thank you. There's another question here. Do you mail seeds out to regions that are not Ottawa based?
Yes.
What is your range?
So we mail seeds in Eastern Canada. So we did Ontario, Quebec, and all Atlantic provinces.
Okay.
We have a similar ecosystem, and so we map we mail seeds to them. Yeah.
Thank you. There are some compliments here. Melanie Rock, you are inspiring, reachable, and able to keep it simple. You are incredible. Be proud.
Oh, thank you. My God, I had a lot of help. Yeah.
Anonymous attendee wants to know, do you accept financial donations? Do you want to quickly answer that?
Oh, yes, we do on our website.
Okay.
Like if you do our donation, you can. And we really exist because people pay it forward. Everything we do is free. But because people's generosity, like we're always able to balance our budget and look professional, and continue to provide it, like pay it forward. And so it's really amazing the generosity of people. And we have a lot of disabled people that participate with us, like neurodivergent members of LGBTQ plus communities. Like it's really like when you don't dictate how people can donate, like you will be surprised how much you will get.
Yeah. I love that you have opportunities for everyone. As you say, everyone brings different skills, different experience. And so maybe someone wants a more like sitting down at a table, chatting, drinking wine while sorting seed, while someone else wants to be more out there. Fantastic. Someone, Rome, who I know is a ranger, was asking about getting seed from you, but Rome is in BC. So Rome, Winnie and I can help you with getting some seed. We can connect you with some other rangers that also collect and share seed. Another couple questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and the reason why we don't, just to be transparent, is because if you share native seeds that are outside their native range, like they can become invasives. And so, native to Ontario might be invasive in BC. So we're also trying to spare your ecosystem and not introduce plants that don't belong where you are.
Right, right. What is the percentage of native plants in one's yard to make the best impact? You had mentioned 70%.
70%, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I would not get too hung up on a percentage. Like you also said, Melanie, every additional native plant is a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
So we do our best.
People are just, the first thing we tell people is ID all the plants you have on your property. So if that's all the energy you have, start with that. Then once you've identified them, try to limit the spread of invasives. If you have a little bit more energy, try to remove your invasives. And then if you have a little bit more energy, then add a little bit of native to maybe replace some non-native plants in your garden so then it doesn't destroy your design. And then after that, you can go full removing your turf and adding native plants. I'm more of an extremist, so I just went like, woo.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to show.
That's usually not what people do.
Yeah. That picture of your basement makes me laugh because I think my family thinks I'm already like obsessed, but when they see that picture of your basement,
yes, I have a nice husband. He looks at this job as making sure I don't hurt myself. He's given up on trying to control me a long time ago, so he's just going like this.
Someone has a suggestion here. The bulk barn gives out free pails if you need them for your,
Okay.
that's a little tip from someone.
Okay.
Another person wants to know, do you have information about harvesting seeds and when? You do.
Yes, I do. Yes, yes, we do
Yes,
in the
yes.
spreadsheet I mentioned, and it
Go
also
to the
tells you the
website.
month to harvest.
Yes. Who funds the mailing? Someone wants to know.
So it's basically we are 100% grassroots. We don't receive any grants or anything. It's just people making individual contributions.
Okay, great.
Somehow it
And
works. And we really save a
mhm,
lot of money by making our own paper envelopes. That would be our biggest cost
paper
center,
envelopes.
but
I have a
a
little
lot.
tip from a
Oh,
friend.
yes.
Dorte, who is like you, a superstar in this,
Okay.
he has a friend who works for the passport office,
Okay.
and they have all of these envelopes they throw out, so she gets them now.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've used like
Yeah.
envelopes, also like like churches that are closed, like like schools, like people that are closing their in-person offices. Like we take pretty much everything and we reuse we even have a little like fun game on Facebook when it's making envelope time where we post
Nice.
like the funniest envelopes that people are making, and we imagine people when they open it like if you notice like there's different faces and
That's
we find that
wonderful.
really funny, but. So that really keeps our costs down, and like people like really find that healing also to because it's all like I'm thinking of any of Green Gables, that time of the year when they would all get together and they would chat and then do something manual with their hands. Like it's
Mhm.
also very
Yeah,
therapeutic for people that like to do things while watching TV, or it's like knitting or crocheting.
absolutely. We have a few people from Alberta and BC that Winnie and I
Nice.
can reach out to, right, Winnie?
Yes, and I wanted to like quickly because I know the time is it's getting towards the end of the webinar. But Peter particularly asked like in BC, where can you look for seeds? So a quick question, a quick answer is Fell Morton in Lions Bay. They have this very organized group that often they would have events, seasonal events to give out seeds. So, Peter, I would suggest that go to all the BC, Vancouver, North, and Butterfly Way Facebook groups, and just ask that question, and you'll be surprised how much help you can get. So Amber will look into Western Canada to get seeds. Maybe we can be in touch later as well. That we can actually share more information.
Thank you, Winnie. Yes, we are going to wrap up. One last thing I'll mention is I did put a list of webinars coming up. Samuel, who might still be on the line, maybe not, but he's fantastic. He's the one who did that wonderful graphic that Melanie showed. He's in New Brunswick. He will be doing a seed sitters webinar for us. It's just our cutesy name for winter sowing. So we have one coming up in English, one in French. But before that, we have Dorte delivering a wildlife friendly fall garden care webinar. The link is in there. You'll also get it. You'll also see the chat when I send out an email to you with the recording. Melanie, this was fantastic. I could spend
Good.
4
I did
hours
like this.
chatting with you, but I'll let you go. Thank you so much, and thanks everyone for joining us tonight. It's been such a pleasure. Take
Thank
care,
you.
everybody.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie, again. Thanks, Winnie.
Thanks, Colleen. Bye, Melanie.
Bye-bye.